So, I think I want to start here. What is this garbage? All right, looks like I've hit some kind of idiotic paywall. I got to open this stuff in Safari, maybe. Weird how I get paywalls only in some browsers, not in others. All right, so OpenAI may make their own chips. They say they cost them 4 cents per query, and they're trying to find cheaper solutions. This is what most of the big companies do. I think Google makes their own chips, a lot of companies do. At a certain size, it makes sense. Usually what they do is they buy a chip manufacturer and incorporate it into their business. And Apple gets their chips from, I think they used to get them from Taiwan. I'm not sure where they get them now, but I think they have them custom made. They have their own their new ARM chip, so that's probably a good idea.
Apple chip is from TSMC.
It's from TSM?
TSMC.
TSMC, which is Taiwan, I think, yeah. Yeah, Taiwan Semiconductor. All right, and this is the City College blocking everything. I'm getting too much garbage here. But this was a cute hack. I guess City College is going to block hacking sites too now. But what these guys did was they found that you could trick AI into breaking its security rules by asking the question in a really obscure language like Zulu. And apparently it understands all those languages, but the defenses do not understand those languages, and that makes perfect sense from what I've read about how the defenses work. They've added another layer that tries to detect if you've asked a forbidden question and block it, and apparently their second layer wasn't trained on as many languages as the first layer. They probably didn't even intend to train the first layer on Zulu, but they just scraped a whole bunch of the internet. So it did learn a bunch of languages that probably the designers didn't even know about. Anyway, and this one here is quite important to students if you're at a home network and otherwise can get past the worthless City College firewall. OpenAI wants people to find their security flaws, and they're recruiting a red team. They're going to have bug bounties and everything else. So if you're outside a ridiculously, stupidly filtered network, other than like the one I'm on, you can open this article and find out how to be on their red team if you're interested in that. All right, let's see what they will allow me to see at the college. This one is pretty important. All Linux distributions with graphics, essentially, almost all of them use GNOME, and there's a one-click remote code execution on GNOME. And it has to do with a library called libq, and this is something used to lay out tracks on a CD, but the point is, you don't even have to open a file. Just viewing it is enough. Viewing the list of files is enough. This reminds me a lot of the attack that the US and Israel did on Iran, Stuxnet. All you had to do was plug in a USB stick, and when the window opened to show you the files, that was it, you were owned. So it sounds very important, affects almost all Linux distributions. Right now, there is no proof of concept code available, but I'm sure that will be here soon because this is a coordinated disclosure, so updates are coming. And when the updates come out, it'll be a simple task to reverse engineer the update and figure out how to do it. So probably within a week, we'll have the attack code, and you'll be able to own anybody that hasn't updated their Linux system, which will be a lot of people because people do not put on Linux updates quickly because they think they're safe, which they emphatically are not. There was a report from a vendor analyzing the amount of malware, and they said that attacks on open source software has gone up by 800% in the last couple of years. There are many Linux attacks now, there are many open source attacks, there are many supply chain attacks, and there are many bootloader attacks. And just a few years ago, we thought all that was exotic and we would never see it. Now we're seeing it. So people do need to prioritize their Linux updates the way they prioritize their Windows updates. And I think very few people know that. So Google is adding Rust to the Android kernel, just like Microsoft is working on adding it to the Windows kernel, and Linux is adding it to Linux kernel. This is really good, and they talk here about the reason for this is because, as we do exploit development class here, the same old memory corruption vulnerabilities have been plaguing us for 20 years, and they're still there, and they're all entirely because of using C and C++ and C#. The C language has this ridiculous way of handling memory that causes programmers to frequently make the same mistakes over and over and over, and Rust is a memory-safe language that would just end all that. It is undeniable that you'd be much better off if you wrote that stuff in Rust. So each operating system is gradually moving to replace at least their most critical components with code written in Rust. And this trend will probably continue a lot more. I see some comment in the chat room. OpenAI was on the Joe Rogan podcast. Oh, my goodness. Well, good luck with that if you can stand Joe Rogan. I can only listen to about 5 minutes of that before I want to throw up. But apparently it's fascinating. It's the #1 podcast in the world. He's richer than anybody. Apparently, just like Donald Trump, there's a huge bunch of people that love this stuff. I'm not the target demographic, apparently, but there is a large demographic of people that love Joe Rogan. So this was very interesting. Brian Krebs, who is not very technical, he's a journalist, and his main thing is sort of political journalism about understanding what the Russian crime families are doing. He analyzes malware in this tool called any.run. This is an online sandbox. I think next time I teach the malware analysis course, we're really going to have to use these. It's an online sandbox, and what he said, it just shows you everything. It runs the malware in an online sandbox nowhere on your machine. It reports all kinds of information about it here, and if you go down here and search for API, it will show you the API calls it makes, and you can see the Telegram API calls as it connects to a Telegram channel, which I think is the command and control center. So this is extremely powerful and extremely safe and extremely easy. It reminds me of a lot of my courses now. Students don't really need to set up their own virtual machines or anything. There are these online resources where you can just do it all with nothing more than a web browser. And this looks like one of the really good ones, AnyRun. Anyway, so another huge thing, Cloudflare and a bunch of other companies all announced this today. They found a new way to amplify DDoS attacks. And the way it works is HTTP2. Now, HTTP2 is the new transport protocol, and it's being used to make web pages load faster. But it has a bug. And the bug is you can request a page and then cancel the request, and then request a page and cancel the request, and you can do that apparently hundreds of times per second, and that will totally burden the server. You can end up flooding a server requesting more data than it could even deliver to you. Previously, the largest DDoS in the world was limited by the amount of bandwidth you could move through the wires, but this one is not limited by the amount of bandwidth you can move through the wires. So they said it made the largest possible attack 3 times bigger than the old attack. And Cloudflare found it, like they find almost everything, because Cloudflare protects websites from DDoS attacks, and so they detect all the DDoS attacks. Pretty much, and they say when attackers develop a new tool, they typically test it on Cloudflare to see if they can punch through Cloudflare, because it's probably the most hardest thing to punch through. So that's called HTTP2 Rapid Reset. I see more comments here. Joe Rogan has several times the audience of LOL. Well, I don't know what LOL is, but anyway, it's incredibly popular. Yeah, Twitch isn't jittery. Yeah, what kind of home theater stuff? I don't have any home theater stuff. I assume that was just some kind of internet problem. Anyway, so Google is making their passkey system the default, which I thought was probably a good idea, although I haven't used it yet. The problem with passkey systems is the idea of passkeys, you don't need passwords anymore. You have some device like your phone that uses biometrics like your face, and then it uses that as your authentication everywhere. But the problem is it's tied to the device. And some of your devices do not have biometrics, like your laptop. So in that case, it would just depend on your password to log into your laptop, and that's why this author is really mad, because she said there's no way to add 2-factor to it. And some of your devices are not that secure. And also it's tied to the device. So she said anybody that can get on one of your devices, like a stalker that sees you in the subway and watches you type the PIN in your phone or something, could now get in all your accounts and ruin your life. That's why they say this is really bad and you shouldn't use it. But apparently Google's doing it. The problem I have with it, which is also the problem Leo Laporte has with it, is that it's not standardized enough. Microsoft has their version, Google has their version, Apple has their version, and they don't really talk to each other as well as they should. So the only people that can really get a lot of good out of it are people that are all on one brand. Like if everything you have is Apple, then you might be okay, but you also need everybody in your family to use Apple if you want to share passwords and stuff with them. So anyway, we'll see. I certainly like the idea of having FIDO2, which is what the basis of this is, where you have biometric authentication to get in places, but you should have the option to have a second factor, like a PIN with it or something, to make it more secure. And apparently Google didn't think of that. And people are arguing whether Google is good or bad about this. I mean, the argument, of course, which I think is probably a very strong argument, is most people won't use any of this. They find it all impossible. They just have one password that is password 123, and they use it everywhere. They never change anything. They find all this frustrating. I know my elderly relatives would just always forget the password, have to reset it all the time, unless they use the same password everywhere. And just these more and more complicated systems would make them more and more frustrated. So from Google's point of view, for 90% of the viewers or 99% of the viewers, just making it easy to use is the only consideration. And having some complicated extra feature is going to cause more harm than good. Yeah.
Write down on paper.
Of course.
That's a real password manager.
Of course, and writing down on paper is not bad if you put that paper somewhere safe. And most of them have learned they have somewhere safe they put their $100 bills, so you put it there. That's right. That's not a bad system, actually. But anyway, that's why I can see both sides of this. The security people want to have more security. Google wants it to be easier to use because, of course, the main thing that's going to happen is a whole bunch of people are going to get locked out of their Google account as they can't navigate this. And then Google will have all these tech support calls they don't want to deal with. So anyway, I'm going to stop this recording.